please welcome on stage our moderator, Aura Lindenberg.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming for this first session of the day. You are superstars for making it after last night's party. My name is Aura Lindenberg. I'm from the Finnish broadcaster YLE. I work as a news executive producer of news audio, and I'm very excited to moderate this very interesting discussion today. In this session, we are going to be talking about news avoidance, and even more specifically, what can we do to help people stay informed and engaged with the news? As we all know, given the headlines we read every day, this is not going to be an easy task in the near future. But luckily, we have the best speakers with us today. We have Emma Thedom, who is head of audiences for BBC News and World Service, and we have Tav Klitgaard, who is CEO from Zetland, a Danish company. I will be coming back to the stage when it's time for questions. At the end of, sorry, it's touching my skin. Yeah, the earring. Yeah, I'll take it off later. So there will be time for questions at the end of both presentations, so please be ready to put your hand up, and we'll surely have an interesting discussion at the end of presentations. But now let's welcome Emma to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be here this morning to do the first session. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about news avoidance. As I'm sure many of you will have seen, the Reuters Institute for the past couple of years has been monitoring the percentage of people around the world that say that they are actively avoiding the news at least some of the time. On the next slide, I have a clicker. I do have a clicker. This is the data that looks back from 2017 to 2024, and you can see across the markets that Reuters survey, news avoidance has grown from around 29% back in 2017 up to 39% the last time they did that survey. Something that we're particularly worried about in the UK, because perhaps unlike other European contests, we frequently find ourselves in the top 5 news-avoiding nations across Europe, coming in at number 5 in the past year. In stark contrast to some of the Scandinavian countries where you're seeing half the levels of news avoidance that we're seeing in the UK, and also other nations like Greece, Bulgaria, Turkey and Croatia. So we obviously wanted to understand this a bit better and understand what the BBC and other news providers could do to try to combat it. When you ask audiences why they're avoiding the news, the answer could not be clearer. I also really like the "world just bad" that sits on top of the word depressing. One of the journalists that I've been speaking to about this says that to him it feels like climate change, a sort of unstoppable force that's rolling towards us, and it's perhaps too late to do anything about it. But we weren't willing to stand for that. We thought if we could dig deeper, speak to some news avoiders around the UK, we could maybe understand what was driving it at a deeper level and what we could be doing to combat it. What was really interesting when we first started speaking to our audiences, it's 50 to 60 news avoiders all around the UK, they described this explosion of journalism, and I think that we've probably heard a lot about that in the conference over the past couple of days ourselves, where you've got a traditional radio offer, you've got a podcast offer that is now being visualised, that goes on social media, on top of traditional TV news broadcast that also gets clipped up to be on social media. You've got print news providers that are turning their content out online, also on social media. So all of this is adding to a real explosion of choice and an explosion of journalism that our audiences need to navigate. So when we spoke to people, they were telling us about this sense of information overload, that there was so much coming at them the whole time, and maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where they might check in with news in the morning before they went to work, maybe again at lunch and in the evening. Now that information is coming at them constantly throughout the day, and they felt like they couldn't turn it off. That particularly, for the past few years, I think as we'll all know too well, the omni-crisis nature of the news agenda. It's been one crisis event after another, and that can feel particularly wearing for audiences. So this combination of loads of information, a lot of it feeling really negative, can lead to our audiences feeling overwhelmed, and then, as you saw in the previous slide, depressed by the news. But that's not it. If you layer on top of that the growing narrative around fake news, misinformation, disinformation that we're hearing again across all markets and all around the world, this data is taken from our regulator, the Office of Communication, and it was asking audiences whether they felt that they could spot fake news. Have you seen any fake news in the past 4 weeks? And you can see that more than 4 in 10 people in the UK said, yes, I have, rising to 50% among our men and our youngest audiences. Ofcom also asked our audiences whether they felt confident that they could spot fake news. And actually quite a lot of people say that they can, but again, 4 in 10 aren't confident. So on top of that constant flow of information, a lot of it feeling negative, many people aren't sure whether they can actually trust what they're seeing at all. So because of all of this, some people are beginning to tell us that they actually don't feel as though there is a centralised agreement on what is the news today, because they're getting different messages, different stories from different platforms. So they're needing to figure out for themselves what they think is the news. And they're doing it using 4 key considerations. The first one is this true? The second is this new? The third, is this important for me? And then fourth, what's in it for me? So is it true? As we've just seen, the truth can be harder to gauge for people nowadays, and what they're doing is seeking new and additional markers of authority. So rather than thinking, perhaps as they always have, I'll go to the BBC, I can trust it, they're thinking, oh, I love that guy on that podcast, I'll see what he thinks about this. I love following that other journalist on social media, I'll go to them and see what they think about it. I love that celebrity, I'm going to go and see what they're saying about it. So the truth is harder to gauge. Is this new? Again, we're all acutely aware of the long-running news stories that dominate all of our news agendas, thinking about Israel, Gaza and Ukraine, and we heard yesterday about the fatigue that might come from following those stories. The challenge for some of our audiences is these stories feel like they've been rumbling on for a really long time, so when they're getting updates, are they genuinely new? And are those updates important for them individually? They might understand that they're important for the world, but for those individual people, is this update something I need to pay attention to? And again, audiences aren't always sure. Because while the cost of consuming the news feels clear to them, can leave them feeling depressed, the benefit often isn't. So, this is a very bleak way to start the day. But there was some hope in the research, quite a lot of hope, I thought, because actually when we spoke to people who told us they were news avoiders, they were actively avoiding the news. Actually, none of them wanted to be news avoiders. They felt almost guilty about it. They wanted to connect with the world around them, but they were just finding it quite hard to do that. And not only that, total news avoidance is really rare. When we spoke to audiences in the UK who said they were avoiding the news, when we asked them what they understood about what was happening in the world, they could reel off a load of stories. So they were getting news from somewhere. So perhaps what we all need to do is think slightly differently about news avoidance. And rather than thinking about it like an identity or like climate change that's coming at us, perhaps we should be thinking of it more like a consumption strategy. Audiences sometimes employing avoidance to allow news in at other times. And that's how we're beginning to think about it at the BBC. So when you think about news avoidance in that way, you can begin to look at the consumption strategies audiences are employing to help them to allow the news in at different times, and then come up with editorial strategies, audience strategies based on those. So we segmenting the audience into these 4 groups. The first one, we have called it total avoidance. These are those people who really do try to push the news away, but they will engage when the news story is big enough and the benefit to them is clear. So in the UK, something like a general election, or when the Queen died, you'll see these audiences come to news in their millions. The next group, we've called them passive consumers. So these are open to the news, they're receptive to it, but often they are not exerting any curation or control over what they're seeing. So they might just let the news wash over them, come to them via the radio, via social media, not putting in any effort to pick and choose what they want to see. they often have a very poor experience of the news because they're not exerting that sort of level of control that others might be. Then if we move along the engagement scale, next you've got selective consumers. Now these are audiences who are, they kind of are receptive to the news. They are more receptive than the previous groups, but they understand that it will take a toll on them, so they are selective about maybe how much they consume. So they ring-fenced maybe specific times of day. No news after 9 was something that we heard. They might only consume on specific platforms, like I'll only consume on radio, or I love that podcast, but I'm not going to consume anywhere else. Or they might consume specific stories. They might just consume, say, sports and politics, but not consume news about Israel and Gaza, for example. And then finally, you've got our news fans, our active consumers. Now, this is a group of people that love the explosion of journalism. They are really comfortable navigating that landscape, picking social media accounts to follow, picking podcasts to listen to, diving deep into radio stations to find the news programs that are best for them. This group really enjoy consuming the news and are really comfortable doing it. And as you can probably imagine, a lot of us that are in the news industry are perhaps over-catering for this group of news fans. Their view of what's important with the world often completely aligns with ours, and it's the big things that are happening in society, the big things that are happening in the world. For the BBC, they respect our expertise, and they feel that we're trustworthy and we are accurate, so they're really happy with the offer that we're giving them. But the opportunity for growth perhaps lies with the other groups. These groups who do come to us in the big news moments. We see our audiences spiking in their millions when it's general election, the US election. So we do see them coming to us. The challenge is keeping them in between. And what the research showed is they see the same qualities as our news fans. They see that we have an agenda-setting news output that helps audiences really understand what's happening in the world. But to them, it doesn't help them understand what's happening in their world, the things that really matter to them. They see our expertise, but it can feel quite cold and quite distant, and that then doesn't lead to trust in quite the same ways for our news fans. So, what do you do about this? The research pointed to 4 different techniques that could be employed. The first one is broadening the editorial agenda beyond update. So we know that these audiences come to us in their millions when something awful has happened in the world, and therefore they associate the BBC with those awful things that are happening and can tend to shoot the messenger. Instead, if we broadened our offer and gave them what we've been describing as news treats, so still hardcore news that's serious, but is perhaps celebratory in its nature, or slightly off of the core agenda, that might be the type of thing that could help these audiences feel more positively about our offer and come more often. It means that we're going to be present for them in more need states, not just when something awful has happened, but actually when they want to kill a bit of time on their phones or have something uplifting or entertaining to listen to. They might consider our news offer in those moments as well. It's something the newspapers have been doing for decades, where you've got your serious news at the top, and then you've always got something a bit more treatful that sits just beneath it, whether that's lifestyle, travel, etc., etc. So what can we do to broaden our agenda is one of the challenges that we've posed to our journalists. The second is around humanising our update offer, and that was something that we heard on this stage yesterday evening. So in those moments, when we know that we're bringing those audiences in their millions, how can we ensure that in that very important moment for those people, that they're beginning to see our offer in a slightly different way by bringing a bit of humanity to it? And that could be in the presentation style from our journalists and our presenters, but it could also be from the people that we choose to put in our coverage. I think there's obviously a huge trend in our industry towards personalisation and strong personalities. So how can we as the BBC tap into that to help our audiences feel better connected to the people that are bringing them the news and the people who feature in the news? So that's the second key finding that we saw from this. The third was about giving audiences control of their consumption. So again, I don't know what it's like where you will work, but in the BBC, we see huge numbers in big news moments for our live content. Anything that's sort of a live stream that is constantly giving people a feed of news that's updated all the time, whether that be in audio or in digital. That live feed is often generating millions of hits from our audience. But if you are a bit less confident about the news, you don't particularly understand it too well, you don't consume it that often, to jump into the middle of a live feed can add to that sense of chaos. And instead, if we gave audiences a bit of control back, so say the 5 things you need to know about the debate last night, or the 3 most important things that happened yesterday, that can help that news feel more manageable if you package it up in those smaller bite-sized chunks. So that's something that we're also trialing. And then the 4th thing is helping audiences understand that content that's best for them. So we have described how the news landscape has just exploded with so much choice. So whenever we share this with journalists, they say, we do all of that, but it's hard for audiences to find. So newspapers, their online offer is so well set up to navigate audiences to the thing that is right for them, to show them where those news treats are. How can we signal that in our audio offer and across our TV offer? And that's something that our journalists are really thinking about, how you navigate someone through a programme. So those are the 4 key takeaways. How do we combat news avoidance? By broadening the agenda beyond our update offer, by humanising our update offer, by giving audiences control over their consumption, but also by helping them find the content that's best for them. We hope through those 4 different methods, we can help bring more of our audiences back to our coverage more often. With that, I'm going to hand over to Tav.
Hello, good morning. So wonderful to see so many fresh and engaged people here, because we are talking about engagement. And I'm fortunate enough to have Emma set the stage of what is actually the problem. And now I want to try and see if I can show you examples of at least part of the solution. And I'm Tao, I'm from Denmark, and I want to tell you the story about Zetland. And we are kind of succeeding in many of the ways that Emma was just trying to point out that we should. So I have a story to tell about young people actually paying for news. I also have a story to tell about actually making a business out of quality news and doing it without ads, which is important for us. So just very briefly, that's me. My background is within product management, which means I'm not a journalist. And I'm the group CEO of Zetland. And I have prepared like a 3-part rocket for you. I want to just give you a brief introduction to what is Zetland and why do I call it a group. And then I want to try and see if I can explain to you why and how and if we are succeeding. And then at the end, I have a treat for you, which is a little bit about the future and also a little bit about how you can and maybe should try to copy us. So first of all, what is Zetland? I now call Zetland a group and a modern media group, and it's because we have like 3 divisions. So in Denmark, we have the headquarter, and we're about 65 people now working out of the headquarter, doing a Danish news operation, but also doing product development and running the group, which is also then our 10 people working at our tech AI spin-off GoodTape, working with transcriptions for most European media companies. And then we have most recently 25 people in Helsinki in Finland, where we are also trying to build a Zetland-ish news service. In Finland, it's not called Zetland, it's called Uusi Juttu, meaning the new thing. So in its core, Zetland is a digital-only news service. And if you ask people on the street what it is, they will say it's an app. But it is a very different news app. It has a different, it has a different appeal, and there's a lots of things to talk about in this. I will highlight though that you'll see that it's very like colorful. It's very engaging. We're trying to really make news be not feel like homework. Everything we do is published both in text. We're originally like a text service, but now about 80% or more than 80% of our members, they actually consume the news via audio. So We are actually an audio service now, but everything we do is both in text and audio, and that's very important to our service. I could talk a lot more about that. So just a few numbers. We're now about or more than 55,000 paid memberships. So again, no ads, so all we do is subscriptions. About 40% of those are in their 20s and 30s. So compared to at least other legacy news providers in Denmark, we have a very young audience, which is super meaningful. As I said, around 80% choose, so when given the option, do you want to read a news article or do you want to listen to it? More than 80% choose to listen to it, which was kind of mind-blowing to us. We had never expected it, but that means it's super meaningful for me to be here at Radio Days because we are in effect a radio station now. We don't produce a lot of content, I'll get back to that, but actually the average member at Zetland or Uusijuttu consumes more than 8 hours of audio per month. And you might think, well, that's not a lot. Well, actually, compared to how much we produce, it's a lot, because on average, they consume more than 25 of everything that we produce, which of course makes, that's good for business, because we don't produce a lot of content that people don't consume. Okay, so that was like the core numbers. I wanted to try and see if I could follow up on what Emma said to see, okay, so what trends do we see in specifically within news consumptions that we think are important for our success? And I just want to walk you through it. The first one should not come as a surprise for anyone here. Text is not a great experience anymore. Audio, it's a much better experience to actually consume long form and engaging content. So we are, of course, looking very much at services like Spotify, and that's also why our service is actually also a podcast player. So people expect when they come to us that they expect like a newspaper, but then what they get is a podcast player, and they absolutely love that. So the next thing has to do with the overflow of information that Emma was just talking about, which makes people sad and overwhelmed. So we are trying to really highly curate, and I'm showing the Ezra Klein show here because I kind of get the same feeling when I subscribe to a podcast program. I say, okay, I want to do this. I know that there's not going to be more than I can actually have time to consume, and I don't know what is in Ezra Klein show, but I trust him to actually curate whatever is interesting. I trust this guy to curate the world for me. And that's kind of similar to what we're trying to do. So sometimes we will see Zetland as one program. And then within that program, we have a lot of different titles, and actually, but what's important for the consumer is, again, you saw the numbers, they will consume more than 25% of everything we produce, which is what we're promising. Everything we produce will be relevant and interesting for you, and when you open our app, relax. There's not going to be an overload of things that you don't have time to. Just go in, and it's going to be a playful experience. Saying playful, we of course also look not at legacy news websites because they are not always super great. We much rather would look at Netflix or at TikTok, because their way of actually doing discovery, it's just so much better. It's just so much more delightful to go into Netflix and figure out what to do. And we all know the problems within Apple Podcasts. It's just not a very good discovery experience. And so we're trying to build the same things in our, because we want to be a destination app, and we are a destination app. So we are looking at those services and building our technology around the expectations that people who are used to using TikTok or Netflix have to a digital experience. So the fourth one is about being participatory. So that's just a very big trend, and it's kind of obvious. Like all, especially young people, but actually also us, we want to take part in the stuff that we're engaged about. And also, if you are engaged and actually actively taking part in something, you actually much more understand what it's about, right? It's common sense. If you're a passive listener, well, you might forget it. If you're active and actually really engaged in the whatever it is, well, then you understand it better. So it's always our job to try and see if we can, we have to understand that the people that we are talking to, they want to play the elf in World of Warcraft, or they want to upload their own videos to TikTok. And so we do a lot to try and make a community out of news. Oftentimes it has to do with engaging after an article is published. So we have a very active contribution section. We don't call it comments, and I think that's important because it has to contribute to the article. We also do some things before we publish articles. So we very often write out, what is this exciting, or do you know someone, or do you have help us produce this content, and it really works. So then the fifth, and I have 6. The fifth one is that we want our news to be personable. Again, we don't trust guys with ties, sitting on the evening news anymore. We trust people. And in my mind, Hugo de Crypte is one of the best examples. He's just like killing it in France. And younger people, they don't trust Le Monde or Le Figaro. I hope there's no one here, but they trust Hugo because he's like their friend and he's telling them the news, and they know that, okay, I'll just find Hugo each day and I'll hear his 10 minutes of going through the news. And it's because he feels like my friend, and that's what we want to do. So always showing the journalists, it's not Zetland, well, it is Zetland, but it's Helle telling me the news about the world. Super important part. And then the last thing also has to do with news avoidance. Because if you think about it, it's pretty obvious why people would avoid the news. You saw Emma's slide. It is kind of saddening. But if there's one thing that people don't want, it is to pay for something that is making them feel bad and feels like homework. Oh, I should read about Gaza again today. I don't really want to do it because I'm guessing that more people were killed. So what you really want to do is, one thing is mix it, as Emma was telling, but actually also what we found is there is always hope. In any story, there is always hope. And you kind of have to be active as a journalist looking for that hope because it is there. And then you need to kind of a little bit more, focus on that part of the story. Don't ever let people go out of a story with like, okay, so another 15,000 people were killed in Ukraine yesterday. But try and see if you can find, okay, so what can you do about it? Or what are some cool people doing about it? So there is, just looking for the hope in the stories, and that's what we call constructive journalism. It's not about telling good news, which most people think that constructive journalism is about. That's not what it's about. It's about finding hope and actually making people want to engage, want to do something about issues in the world. Okay, so those are the 6 trends that we're seeing, and I believe that they match what Emma was saying very well, and I also really believe strongly that they are a part of why our numbers look like they do. So just briefly about the future. Obviously, we have now our 2 news brands, Zetland and Uusijuttu. We want to also go down that list of countries with trust or with news avoidance, and see if we can make other. We see there are other countries who should probably have a service like Zetland. We also publish books, and then we are more and more venturing into becoming a technology company because it's just super meaningful for us. So we do have a licensable platform solution that we license to other publishers, and then we also do AI transcriptions and are really hopeful about the future of those tech businesses. And again, so this slide is just to show you what I'm working on. And it's just to show that, okay, we're a media company, but last year we grew our revenue with about 35%, and we're planning to do the same this year, and it looks like we will do that. So it's just also an example for you to say, well, it's actually possible to make money primarily by producing quality news and actually having especially younger people pay for it, because they do want to pay for it if it's a good product. So that leads me to my 3 takeaways. One thing is to always think about the distribution, because journalism has to be mediated, and there is so much journalism that's being wasted because the distribution is not good enough. People can't find it. People are being depressed because the next thing is a bomb crater or something. So you have to think about the experience, and it's in the experience that the business is. The business is not in the content. The business is in the content hitting the consumer in the right way. Super important. Then I believe that the future of trust, which is the future of news, is to be human and to be personable. You don't trust institutions anymore, you trust people. You trust your friends, you trust persons that you like and that you feel that they will curate the world for you. And then the last point is that don't believe it when people say that young people don't want news. Don't believe it when they say that they are avoiding the news. It's like Emma said, they don't want to avoid the news. But you can't really blame them if the news that we're giving them is so depressing and has no hope and is mediated through stupid interfaces. How can you blame them for avoiding the news? It's like avoiding heavy metal. And then people will say, well, I'm a music avoider. No, you're not. You just haven't found the right thing for you. Okay? So young people absolutely do care about the news, and they absolutely do want to pay for it. And that's it for me. Please get in contact with me. I would love to talk to all of you. And then let's get the women back on the stage.
Thanks so much for both of our brilliant speakers. I think we can just sit down and have a discussion with you all. While you're warming up your vocal muscles, I will start by asking a few questions from both our speakers, but be ready. I will be looking at you. Emma, trust in journalism is also fragmenting, and I was thinking while watching your presentation that are those 4 things you mentioned, are they also building trust?
Yeah, absolutely, and for a lot of the same reasons that Tav was describing. So the idea of broadening the agenda to make news feel more enjoyable or engaging to consume, we've seen strong correlations between content that audiences tell us they like and content that audiences tell us they trust. So those 2 things are connected, we think, in some way. But similarly, the humanising, the update offer, absolutely we're seeing that trust is moving away from institutions, exactly as you said, towards individuals that people can really connect with. And we've certainly seen that as we've changed our editorial and we've encouraged our presenters to show a little bit more of themselves, we've kept more audiences with us for longer. So I suspect that that's really working. And similarly, going back to that sense that audiences, if they don't like it, they're not really going to trust it. If we can package that content in a way that feels easy to understand, easy to connect with, again, we suspect that in time is going to lead to trust, but trust is such a complex issue, isn't it, for the news industry? But we hope that those things together, along with actually in the BBC, we're trialling a lot of what our CEO is calling radical transparency, showing more of our workings to show that if you can see how it's made, you can trust what it says. That's another aspect of what we're doing that we hope will improve trust.
How does it work at BBC? You know, being very transparent about the process. Are people willing to do that?
Yeah, it's taken a little bit of a gear shift, but I don't know how far programmes like Blue Planet travel around Europe with David Attenborough, but the last 10 minutes of that programme is always how that programme was made, and it's taking that same idea, which actually came from audience research a couple of decades ago. People find it quite interesting to see behind the curtain, but also if you can show your workings, you've got more of a chance of showing your audiences that they can trust what you're doing. So we set up, again, based off of audience research, a new brand called BBC Verify that is there to fact check and sort of show more of the BBC's workings and explain how they find that photo wasn't real, how they find that that piece of information was fake. It shows the workings in that regard. But also in our content, what you will hear much more of now is journalists telling you how they got that interview, setting out at the start what they want to achieve from that interview, talking to the audience and talking to the people that feature on the news programmes about their ambitions and how they've got there. All of that, again, it's so hard to draw lines between that and your trust scores, but we hope that that is having an impact. We didn't see a dip in our trust scores in quite a divisive general election, and we hope that this has sort of contributed towards that positivity.
Can I maybe add to that, because we've seen some interesting things about how to, that when we are humble, when we are in doubt, when we are really like human, then trust rises. So for instance, we at least once a week at the management meetings, we ask ourselves, what can we be transparent about this week? So it's like forcing us to be, so did we make any mistakes that we can communicate about? Because mistakes are the best thing. Because people like, we trust human beings, and what is the difference between a human being and a perfect machine? Well, that is that we make mistakes. We're not perfect. So we are always trying to conquer perfectness, because whenever things are perfect, it's like then why don't we just use AI? I mean, not that I'm saying that AI is always perfect, but it's just, you want the cracks in the facade, and that's what we're always looking for, and that's all also on social media, that the posts that perform best are actually when we talk about mistakes, or when we talk about the area in our office is not really very great. That people love that, because then they hear about, okay, how is the situation behind you telling us the news? Why should I trust you? And it's just great for building trust. And honestly, it feels very good to be transparent and to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I actually want to continue with the subject of trust with you, Tav. Zetland now operates in Denmark and Finland, with both countries have a very high level of trust in journalism and very strong public service media as well. Do you think your journalism model would work in a more polarized media market, where people actually don't trust journalism as much as they do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, because of the 6 reasons that I just showed you. Yeah. I think that I think we all have a responsibility to make people understand that news are not bad for them. Like, society is good for them, and society is important, and we are all important for society. So yes, I mean I don't know that we will see the same numbers if we launched in Greece, but I don't see why the problem is bigger in countries like Greece. So maybe the solution is more needed, because I think that it is just a different way of telling news, and I would love to be, or I would not love to be proven wrong, but but I hope that someone will test it out. It might not be us, but someone should test it out.
Great. So now, anyone with a question here? Here, do we have mics? Yes, we do. Just a moment. And if you can just introduce yourself so we get to know each other. Here.
Hi, my name is Eric. I'm from the Swedish Public Radio. I was wondering, for you, in Zetland, the 80% wanting to experience the news in audio. Have you made any research about how much the text helps the audio? Does your users click the audio and then put the phone back in the pocket, or do they actually watch the text as they listen? Have you done any research about that?
Yeah, a lot. I think the important point here is, so when you are a UX designer, you want to look at the audience. Like, what does the audience want? And really, if you think about it yourself, you might be sitting in your office and it's 5 p.m. and you're thinking about going home soon. You open Zetland and you might read, because you don't have your whatever headphones. So you read the first few paragraphs, and then you go into your car and press play on that article. And normally that would mean, okay, the article starts from the beginning, but we've built it so that it will take up from where you left off in the text, because that's obviously what you want. Like, you already read the first 2 paragraphs. So there is actually about 7 to 10% of our people who are actually doing both reading. I mean, within the same article, both reading and listening. And we still have kind of like a 1-to-1 relationship between the text and the audio, but obviously we produce the audio, so it is a different, but it kind of actually really works. So sometimes it's seamless, but for a lot of people, they don't ever consider the text. Like, they just press play on the top article, and then they put in their AirPods, and then they go into the bus, and they would never read anything. And then, of course, what we want to do is to get them also to engage, and currently we are mostly engaging through text, and so there is kind of a medium challenge there. But the answer would be, it's very different, because people are in different situations. We like to say that the content is here, and you are somewhere. Either sometimes you're just totally listening, sometimes you're totally reading, and that's okay. It's up to you and your situation and your personality, to be honest, sometimes.
Thanks. Anyone else? There? Lady there.
Hello, I'm Teresa from Czech Public Radio, and I would like to ask, you said that you kind of divided the listeners into 4 groups according to their level of news avoidance, but do you know their proportion in population, like how big the groups actually are, and whether it connects to their age or whether they live in big cities?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the people that are totally avoiding the news, that first group, your passive consumers and your news fans in the UK, they're all roughly the same size, which is about 10 million, and our population is about 70 million. Everybody else sits in that selective news avoiding bucket, so that one just second in from the end. And I think that makes sense because a lot of us, I'm sure, even though we probably all love the news, would fall into that bucket some of the time. So yeah, we think roughly each of the same size, apart from that selective avoidance, which is maybe twice, 3 times the size as the others. In terms of demographics, again, for the BBC and for people in the UK more widely, our news fans do tend to be more male, more affluent, and a little bit older, which is reflective of our audience at the BBC more broadly. The total news avoiders tend to be a bit more female and a little bit more, we would say, working class or less affluent. And then your younger groups tend to be spread across total avoiders, passive consumers, and selective consumers. So yeah, really, it's the most affluent, more male, a little bit older are the news fans, and everybody else sort of is spread out across those other 3 segments.
Anyone else? Time for one question. Yes.
Carolyn Saltinger, I'm also from the Swedish radio. What's the reaction of your hardcore fans, Emma, when you gear more towards the selective news consumers? Have you seen any reactions from your the really loyal listeners?
Yeah, so far they've actually enjoyed the changes. So a lot of the trends that sort of culminated in this piece of research we've been seeing for quite some time. So back in the pandemic, we did some research with our flagship radio news programme, which is on Radio 4 in the morning. It's the sort of serious news offer from the BBC and the radio in the morning. And we heard from audiences back in 2021 and 2022 that it felt very serious, particularly compared to other audio news that they were consuming from commercial radio, but also from podcasts that felt warmer and more personable. By comparison, they were telling us that our programme felt like the presenters were in different rooms and didn't know or like each other, and that it was sort of therefore quite a difficult listen, and often they were very challenging to the politicians. You know, it felt very hard and uncomfortable at 7 a.m. to have someone shouting in the radio. So that programme has made a real change, and we just did a bit of research after the news avoidance work to check back in with that audience in particular to say how did they feel about the changes, where we asked the presenters to take off a tie, do the top button, talk to each other, share interest, talk about their children, the football, and the audiences noticed it is the first thing and really liked it is the second thing. And they were actually quite open to, I think, some of the features that they put in. This will make you laugh, but there was a feature about your favourite tree, and we got listeners to dial in and tell us about their favourite tree. And people really loved it, but actually if they didn't, it was fine. It was 3 minutes. They would listen through it, go make a cup of tea, come back, and it was fine. This, it probably isn't for me, but it's not going to stop me listening. So actually a lot of this we found that our core listeners have actually really enjoyed as well, because they are engaging with news beyond the BBC and other tones and styles, and it makes sense that we kind of keep pace with that evolution that's happening elsewhere.
Thank you. Maybe to wrap it up in the kind of way you were taking it, if there is now somebody in the room who is like, okay, I really want to take something back with me that will help my newsroom to work against news avoidance, what is the first thing you would do or advise people to do?
I would copy what Tony Pastor said from Goalhanger yesterday. Tone of voice.
Great. And Emma?
I completely agree. I think tone of voice, being more human, being more personal and personable is the best thing that we can do for audiences to help them connect.
Thank you. Let's do that. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you, Tab. Thank you, Emma.
Thanks.